I have the same challenge at times. I thought it would be good. I was doing a wedding one time, and I thought it would be a good idea to wear contact lenses, which I don't often wear. Till I realized that as I'm getting older, the farsightedness of progressive needs was impacting me. And I went to go read, and I held up the pages, and I couldn't. There was zero chance of putting it into focus. And I just kind of panicked for a minute. I was like, oh, this is not working, right? I need a little bit longer arm, or if I have my glasses, I can at least take it off and bring it really close, and then I can still see. But it looks a little bit funny. Anyways, I am so glad to be here with you. And I wanted to share this message. It's a little bit of a different take on Thanksgiving, but I wanted to take some moments to help us reflect, because we live in a world it is as chaotic as ever. Even just yesterday, we have a new outbreak of violence in the Middle East that is not looking good right now. We have instability in the economy. We have concerns over interest rates and rising cost of living across our country. We have refugees from all over the world seeking to come to Canada and to find safety here. And at the same time, we face the pressures of a growing country with lots of new people and not enough houses and not enough schools and not enough doctors. And we want to be compassionate and loving. And we live in this time where it is easy to get distracted by all of that and find all kinds of reasons not to be thankful this Thanksgiving. And yet, I wanted to take this because when I was preparing for this passage from James just kind of spoke to me and said, consider it pure joy when you face trials of all kinds. And I read that and I stopped in my tracks and I said, whoa, God, are you trying to say something to me here? Because I probably need to hear this. And it was that challenge. Consider it pure joy when you face trials of all kinds. How many of you look at a trial and go, yes, God, thank you. I am filled with joy for this moment. It is not our natural reaction, right? It is not our natural reaction to just embrace the trials of life, whether that be health concerns or an accident, a flat tire, a person driving in front of you who's not participating in the common goodness of all the road rules that should be there. We can find so many reasons to just go, and you can just kind of hear yourself sighing sometimes as you face the day. Rarely is my first response to go, trial. Thank you, God. I'm ready for this one. Now, why is that? And I think it comes back to how we think about Thanksgiving. And throughout my life, most of the time, we come to a time like this at Thanksgiving, and what we would do is we would sit around, and there were lots of times where we would just kind of list off all the things we're thankful for. Thankful for my house and my family and good health and my friends, and we could just list on and on and on, right? We sing the song, count your blessings, name them one by one, and it will surprise you what the Lord has done. And it's true. And there's all these things that we can count as blessings, but you know what? That's not the reason we're thankful. It shouldn't be. Because if all of those things are the reason we're thankful, when those things disappear for whatever reason, then we have reason not to be thankful. Think about that. We said about all those things, we're like, oh God, I'm so thankful for my health and my energy, and now my health and my energy is gone, and it's like, God, what have you done to me? But the heart of thanksgiving does not come from our circumstance and our condition. The heart of thanksgiving comes from knowing that we walk in it whether it be trials or good times or bad times or heartache, we walk in it with Jesus. And that is where thanksgiving comes from. If we truly want to be thankful people, we will look not to our surroundings and go, oh, isn't my life great? We will look to God and go, God, you are so worth more than anything else in my life. And whether I have health or strength, or whether there are good times or bad times, I have gratitude in my heart because I deserve death for my sins. I deserve to be cut off and broken in the relationship with the great creator of this universe. And yet his love was so great that it reached beyond all of my brokenness and all of my unworthiness and said, I love you anyway. And he says the same to you. And when we live in that reality, when we grasp how great the Father's love for us, gratitude is the outflow of that awareness. That all of a sudden, we don't have to be looking at our circumstance and going, oh, this isn't good, and this isn't good, and oh, what am I going to do here? We can look to Jesus and go, yes, in the midst of all of that chaos, there is a rock in whom I can trust. There's one who will lead me through the storm. And we sing the songs about that all the time, but I think we get caught up. I think we get caught up sometimes in just the things of life. I had 5 reasons why I think some people struggle with being thankful. And maybe you don't have this problem at all. Maybe you just walk around filled with thankfulness and filled with joy at every trial that you face. But I think there are some who struggle with being thankful. And sometimes it's because we kind of equate thankfulness with a certain level of our own comfort. I think that's one of the first reasons, is that I'm thankful when things go well and for all the good things in my life, but rarely would I say, oh God, I am so thankful that you put me through that horrible experience last year. Right? Unless we are mature in our faith, which is a sign of maturity that says, yes, God, I am so grateful that you took me through this journey because I have learned so much about who you are. But a lot of times we equate thankfulness with our own comfort. When things are messy, we're less thankful. Sometimes we're so busy looking at the rest of the world out there, and we look at all the people who have more than us or a better life than us, or who don't struggle with the health issues or haven't faced sadness. And we think, oh, why couldn't my life be more like theirs? And when you are looking at the other people around you and comparing yourself, thankfulness just kind of evaporates in that world. It's one of probably the greatest harms of social media is that you have everybody in the world showing all of their best side of things and trying to make you feel jealous of what they have so that you'll want it. And then they'll become an influencer and you'll buy it from them and they'll make money. It's a great gig, but it's all based on envy. It's all based on saying, hey, can I create a world in which you want what I have? And we live in this attitude of, I just need a little bit more. If I just had a little bit more money, if I just had that one thing, if I just had that new car, then I'd be thankful. It would all be good. Sometimes, and I think this sometimes has to do with how people are raised, but I think sometimes there's an instillment of pride that says, I can do this on my own. That I need to do this on my own. That I need to prove my worth to my parents, whether they're alive or not, or to my family of origin, or to myself. That I can do this on my own. And sometimes we're so caught up in trying to prove that we can make it, that we don't look beyond ourselves to see, or even to recognize a dependence on God. There are people who live in the church, who have professed faith in Jesus, who live their entire lives by their own strength. And they wonder not about all that God has done and gifted, but more about how am I going to keep him happy with me? How am I going to prove that I'm good enough? How am I going to prove that I can make it on my own? Sometimes I think we miss out on thankfulness because of misplaced values. If we put our trust in anything else or anyone else or any other institution, then we're going to have times of doubt and frustration and disappointment. I know many people who put their faith in their jobs. As long as I've got my job and I can provide for my family, my life is good and I'm blessed. If that gets snatched away for whatever reason, all of a sudden, paralyzed, lost, not knowing where is my thankfulness. In that moment, it's not even thought about. It's like, oh, that thing which I put my faith in is gone. We can do that with our health. Sometimes we do it with our stuff. As long as I've got everything that we need, I can trust God. And I can be thankful, and I can contribute, and I can make a difference in the world. But when those other things get snatched away for whatever reason, we can find ourselves losing focus, right? And it's true, and it's a part of our journey in life, right? We lose a job for whatever circumstance or whatever reason, and then the focus of everything is on okay, what do I do next? How do I provide for my family? How do I do that? If our health is taken from us, it's all about how do I get through this moment, right? How do I deal with that? If a loved one passes away, there's so many adjustments and so many challenges that we have to go through in the heart of those crises that it's hard to, in that moment, think about being thankful. But James says, consider it pure joy when you face trials of all kinds. Because those trials require you to persevere. Think about that. Perseverance, pushing through the difficult times in our lives, is what allows us to grow in our faith. If we had no difficult times, we would be completely wimpy in our faith. And this is one of the things that I think came through so very clearly during the time of COVID. Churches filled with people who had never suffered, really, never gone through any hardship, and all of a sudden hardship comes and people start becoming angry. They get angry with each other. They weren't living an attitude of gratitude during COVID lockdowns. They weren't living out of a sense of blessedness, right? People were angry. They were frustrated. Even Christian people were screaming at each other and protesting and fighting amongst themselves. And churches saw all kinds of internal infighting, regardless of group, it seemed. And looking on that and looking at that, as a leader, my heart broke. Because what it said to me was that we had so many people who were so used to putting their trust in something other than Jesus that when those things disappeared, they had nothing to fall back on. And they became angry and bitter and tried to protect things. And we had chaos where there didn't need to be chaos. So gratitude is really a natural expression of how good our faith is in Jesus. And the only way we get good at this is going through hard times. It's so, we don't want that, and we don't think that's good for us. We like to avoid the hard times as much as possible. But James writes and says, consider it pure joy when you face trials, because these trials produce perseverance, which increases our faith, which rewards us in the end with a faith that cannot be damaged no matter how bad the circumstance. That's the heart of what I want for you to have for Thanksgiving. Is I want you to know that your confidence in God's ability to provide is great enough to take you through any hardship you face. I don't know where we're going in this world, but you know from everything that we've seen and heard and everything we've experienced that the world is tipping, right? There's unbalance all over the place, whether it's in the environment, whether it's in political structures and systems of government that we've been quite comfortable with for many years. And a lot of times we put our trust in those identities. I'm Canadian, or I'm American, or I'm part of this belief system. And that is what gives us confidence. But friends, all of those things are fragile. They can all disappoint us and they can all fall away. The question is, can you stay thankful in the midst of all that uncertainty? And can you live with purpose in each moment? Trusting God to take you through. How do we get there? Well, for me, and I don't think it's possible lately for me to come through a sermon and not say it all comes back to Jesus. Because the older I get, the more that is true than it has ever been true, and the more that I'm realizing that that is the heart of everything we're about. Jesus said, when I am lifted up, I will draw all men to myself. We celebrate communion and we remember what he did for us. That is the heart and central ordinance of the church in taking the Lord's Supper and in recognizing that it was Jesus who bridged that gap between us and God and made it possible for us to live in hope and faith and forgiveness and grace, even in difficult circumstances. Jesus himself modeled that as he went through the trial of his own life, as he faced Pilate, as he faced the crowds of people shouting, "Crucify him," as he was beaten and whipped and had a crown of thorns placed on his head, and as he had a sword pierce his side and his nails went into his hands and his feet, he continued to love, continued to forgive, did not get angry, did not despair. What better model than that when we face sufferings? But it wasn't just that, right? His disciples, every one of them who had gathered around him during his life, many who thought he was going to be the political leader who would save the day for Israel, who would set them free and establish a new kingdom, they put their trust in that political system that they thought would somehow save them if Jesus was king. And Jesus abandoned that thought and changed their minds, and they were like, whoa, and they weren't sure. And when he was getting crucified, most of them fled away and a few hung around. But it was really only John who was there at the side when Jesus was being crucified, and Jesus said, "John, take care of my mom." But afterwards, when Jesus rose again, all but Judas, who had betrayed him, came back. They gathered, they believed, they trusted, and they lived their lives in a time of continued uncertainty. In a world where the political agenda was against them, where they were beaten, nailed to crosses, burned at the stake, they lost their lives to proclaim that Jesus is God and he loves the world. And even when they died, they did not despair, for their confidence was there. They knew that no matter what happens, God would be with them. And friends, I've shared it before, and it's shaped my life so much that I can't help but share it, that was the hope for me. When my dad passed away, that was the message that God gave me, and it has held me so strong to this very day. God is still with us, even in heartbreak, in disappointment, in challenges and trials. Friends, I don't know what's coming in our world, but I know that God is able to allow us to go through it, and come out the other side knowing that we are with him. Whether I live or die, Paul said. Whether I live or die, I don't care, that just that Christ be lifted up. Are we ready for those challenges? Are we ready for those trials, which I feel like we've had a taste lately. In my life, the last few years have been some of the most interesting from that perspective, right? So much turmoil going on. It's a taste. Do we, as Christ followers, take up the challenge to consider it pure joy, these trials we have faced? To realize that maybe COVID and climate change is just the beginning of a journey that God is trying to prepare his people for even more tumultuous times. Are we ready to take that and live through it with victory and hope and know that God is still God no matter what happens in this world? Or are we going to moan about it and complain about it and become depressed about it, wondering what's God doing? God hasn't changed. He loves us. He calls us to trust him. And when we do, when we truly trust in him, he will carry us through every circumstance that we could encounter. We do not need to be afraid of war or famine or disease or climate change. We can walk and do our part to love this world in the midst of that, because that's what Christ has called us to do. So, be thankful is a crazy command. It's a crazy challenge for you. Not because of all the things that you have, but be thankful because of the God in whom you trust, who is able to sustain no matter what. Should my life end today, I can be thankful, for God is with me. And no matter what happens, I want you to know that you have the opportunity to walk your days in the power and knowledge of Jesus Christ. That you don't have to be afraid, that you don't have to be dismayed, even when things go south in a way that you never expected. God is able. He is my rock and my foundation. He is the one in whom I've placed my life. And I hope you trust him with yours. Let's gather together. We're going to sing in closing the great hymn, How Great Thou Art. I want you to stand with me as we sing, and then we'll close in prayer.